Take 3. I was interrupted by a student, so I had to start over. My maps are kind of chaotic because I hate maps. And I chose my papers in ways that, because they ultimately appealed to me, because I think I had to stretch myself or challenge myself to get through them. I chose an artifact from Ethics in the Age of Self-Interest that's called Coverture, Imagery, and Fantasy, or Why Women Aren't Libertarians. The second one for my concentration was from my critical thinking class, Philosophy 505, or 5005, I guess, with Dr. Yusra, and it's called The Simulation Argument, There's Another Brain in a Vat. And both of these connect 18th century philosophies to current issues. The coverture paper talks a lot about social contract theory, which interests me a lot, and it talked about marriage contracts, which, according to Hobbes and Locke, predate social contract issues. And since libertarianism derives a great deal of its current thought from social contract, there's a problem because women are written out of the social contract. So libertarianism has a lot of imagery involved in it that just does not appeal to women, and shuts them out. And that's on top of its very individualized and somewhat selfish ideology. And if you're a libertarian, I apologize, but we're not going to get along on that one. The simulation argument derived out of we had to watch a video about Elon Musk talking about how we lived in a computer simulation, and I traced back that argument to a philosopher named Nick Bostrom, who threw out the argument, and his argument was either human beings will never develop a computer simulation, or they've developed them and refuse to run them, or we live in one. And when I read the argument and read some of his follow-up stuff on that, I was like, this is nonsense, because basically, if reality is perception, then it doesn't matter. And I used John Locke again, and this time I used is it David or George Berkeley? I don't remember. Archbishop Berkeley's ideas on perception and reality, to make the case that the brain in a vat simulation, which argues that if you're a brain in a vat, you would not know it. And to argue really what all Bostrom was doing was the same thing, except it was a bigger vat. Those two papers pushed me and made me rethink some stuff I was not comfortable with, and my husband will tell you I struggled and yelled at the computer a lot writing the simulation paper because I was just that frustrated with it. For my other 3 threads and artifact threads, or artifacts I should say, I chose 2 for my arts one, and one's not really from an arts class. Well, it's an arts class sort of, but I didn't take it as one. The first one started in children's lit, and the second part of it kind of ended up in The Power of Myth. Dr. Loiso, who taught both of them, had us write, one was a fable and one is a trickster story, and I don't remember which is which right now. But what I ended up doing was writing about my cats and my pets. And this pushed me because I don't usually write fiction, but the stories came out really well and they really connect, so I'm going to try to weave them together for the artifact thread here and for the paper, because they did both kind of challenge me to write in a creative way that I don't normally do, and to take and approach something differently. That's my creative thinking one. For my science artifact, I'm using a paper I wrote for Generation Text, which is a class I did not enjoy, but that's primarily because it kept trying to tell me millennials were still in high school when millennials aren't even the ones entering college anymore. We're on Generation Z. So I had a lot of frustrations, but the paper I wrote for that class I really enjoyed because it pushed me to rethink things as well, and it's called Generation Y, Technology, Work Ethic, and Parenting. A Change is going to come. And the paper argues that because of millennials being digital natives, they look at work ethic and parenting in ways that are striving to balance, and that their work ethic is a movement away from the Puritan work ethic that the baby boomers had to something that philosopher William Roth calls the developmental work ethic that he says Aristotle came up with, which is more life-work balance. And you can see that in the millennials and their use of technology to do work. Because I got really tired of millennial bashing in that particular class. And I'm kind of proud of that paper because I wove philosophy in with parenting and pulled in a bunch of different threads. I might have to do a little revision on it to make it a little more tight. But it was a pretty solid essay. The last one is my history paper. I took 2 history classes, the Civil Rights Movement, and I took history and geography of the Bible. And at first I thought I'd do the 30-page timeline. I turned out for that. Nope, it wasn't quite that long. But I don't know if the timeline would fit the criteria because there wasn't a lot of writing. It was literally cut and paste and put stuff up. We didn't have to do a summary with it or anything. So I put that aside and I went back to the Civil Rights Movement, and I found my final paper there, which examined the success or failures. And I did like that paper. Not a desperation choice. It needs to be revised to be a little bit longer because it's not quite long enough, and I'd like to bring it more up to date since the class was in 2015 and in 2019 things have changed even worse. But that artifact also pushed me out of my comfort zone and made me examine how things were in the world right then and there. And then the final one is my concept map. And because I didn't choose my threads on what they had, or my artifacts on what they had in common, I had to sit and think, and there are a few things they have in common. One, they're all about connections. They're all about connecting different ideas in different time periods and different people's connections with each other. So they're also about community in that sense. That shows up a lot in the Generation Y paper, the Civil Rights Movement, and my creative ones. Not so much my concentration ones, though in both cases I end up projecting something that focuses mostly on individualism. So connections and community, challenge, and I want to say empathy because they all try to get, I think all my papers have as an underlying concept, trying to put yourself in other people's positions and think in another person, in their way. So hopefully this will help me fulfill that part of our capstone projects. But we'll see. Sorry for the length of the video. I'm long-winded and this is the 4th time I've tried to make it today. Thanks. Good luck.